Hello and welcome to part 3 of our Copilot Starter Kit user group journey. This is a subset of our Microsoft 365 Champions group that we have on LinkedIn and our YouTube series. It's really just trying to pivot a little bit. Not that we want to ignore Microsoft 365, but we're really trying to dig into how Copilot now enhances Microsoft 365. But in particular, I think the challenges that we're seeing out there, and this is something that we've talked internally about, and we want to acknowledge, is that this is still bleeding edge. I think there's a perception out there that, and in fact, if anyone's gone to a conference, every conference you go to is talking about AI, and so I think it's important that we talk about it. I think it's important that we work through ways in which we can find value out of leveraging AI. And that's really a part of our series. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that it's still not that it's unproven completely. It's just it's not known exactly how to apply it to your world. And so I think it's still in the bell curve of leading edge to bleeding edge. I think we're still in the bleeding edge before we get to the leading edge. But I think the other thing that's really important to acknowledge is that AI is moving so fast. It's the fastest moving technology we've ever seen. It's going to go from bleeding to leading quick. And so I think part of our journey and part of our mission is to share lessons learned, and we're all learning at the same time, because I don't think anyone really, other than someone maybe at Microsoft, could be considered a Copilot expert yet, because it's only been around for not even a full year. But trying to get the word out, trying to educate ourselves, trying to find ways to test, try, play. And that's really what our Copilot series part 3 today is about, is the next phase of that journey, where we went through some processes, have worked with some of our peers and one of our clients, as well as internally, about how we select certain champions. We've got one of our own champions joining us today, Nick. He'll introduce himself here in just a minute. But also, what have we done to initiate the journey and try and put some structure around this? And we're hoping that if any of this resonates, we're happy to share this information. If you'd like a copy of it, even if it's something you can tweak and apply better to your organization. So with that said, that's the high level of what we're trying to accomplish today, is just give you some ideas about how you might start just trying to use it, how you might start trying to figure out how this might work in your organization. So with that said, let me hand it over to Nina. She'll talk through the agenda, introduce Nick, and let's get rolling with the rest of the content for today.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. All right, so let's roll right into the agenda for today. So we did in a previous video talk a little bit about some of those initial seed assignments and some of the lessons learned there. And now, obviously, since then, we've done some iteration, and we wanted to do a second phase of seed assignment. So we do want to just talk through some of the ways and processes that we went about to actually have people apply for it, and kind of the selection process, and some of the other things that we had to take into consideration with this next wave. And then in one of the previous calls, we had one of our clients actually join one of these calls, because I think at this point, Nate, people are tired of hearing just you and me talking all the time. So we would love to just get other people's input. And so today we actually have Nick joining us. Nick, do you want to just introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah, hi, my name is Nick Camella. I've been with MyTech Partners about 2.5 years. Right now I'm a project coordinator for our consulting branch, so I work with Nina for 365 engagements and our security consultant on security engagements.
Great. Yeah, so we wanted to bring Nick in today just to kind of see some use cases and how he's been using Copilot. I just love the enthusiasm. He's really just jumped in and kind of embraced this new technology, which we really appreciate. And we have quite a large group of champions. We just met with them yesterday, and just such great feedback, and how everybody is taking the time. We know that they're actually busy with other stuff as well, but really being intentional about trying to see how Copilot can be applied in their world. So we really appreciate that, and we just wanted to get some feedback from him today as well. The last thing on the agenda today is just wanted to show you our Copilot prompt and scenario library that we're busy building out in our SharePoint intranet. And hopefully you'll get some ideas around maybe how you could be doing something similar. It's using technology we're all already using, but it's actually been quite helpful that as people are finding really useful ways to implement Copilot, that they're sharing that through the library with others in our organization. So yeah. Alrighty, so first thing we wanted to hit on today is those seat assignments for round 2. So in the previous video, we looked at those existing licenses. We pulled some reports to see usage, and realized that we wanted to actually extend this to others in the organization. We also were specifically looking at doing a good cross section, because I think that's kind of, and Nate, you can probably comment on this as well, trying to figure out where it's most appropriate. I think that's still the big question mark for us, is like, is this appropriate for every role and every department? Probably not. But in order to figure that out, we need to get a good cross section of people involved in this whole process. And before I head over there, Nate, maybe you just had a comment on that.
Yeah, I think too. Our initial thought. I'm sharing this because I think it's a lesson learned, and B, if there's other people out there that might be thinking this, like this is, I think you'll probably, hopefully it'll resonate with you as far as maybe like, oh yeah, well that makes sense, because I think we started with some of our strategic leadership team, which are candidly the busiest people in our organization, or some of the most busy people in our organization, and as well as trying to coordinate schedules and carve out time for that group to collaborate and share was very difficult, right? And it made it like we had the idea of like, oh, this team already meets on a certain frequency. We'll just carve out a little extra time when we do that. And there's always so much that team is working on that's more operationally impacting, or fire drills, or what I mean, they're putting out fires, those kind of things. That it just didn't. They were using it, but it just, having the collaborative side and like the figuring out side just wasn't what we were hoping for. And so I think, which again, in hindsight, it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. Why? And so we realized like we need to like, let's just get this to the next layer of folks, and try and involve just as many roles in the organization as possible. And I'll just say one last thing, Nina, that we, like you said, a cross-functional group, but we also didn't want it to be too many people. In my experience facilitating groups, different peer groups and things over the years, you 10 to 12 people, you get more than that and it can get a bit unruly, and you really don't afford the opportunity for everyone to give feedback. So that was the other thing that we looked at, is like, let's try and get as good of a cross section of our team as possible, but yet not have too many people where we weren't able to actually ensure people could have time to give feedback. So that was a high level of it. I can provide more as we go along here, Nina, as far as some thoughts, but those are the initial ones off the top of my head.
Yeah, and one of the other things we realized is we really had to get something on the schedule and on a regular cadence. I think that was a piece that we were missing before, and so it kind of gets lost in all the other activities going on a daily basis. And in order to get through a 45-minute lunchtime slot, just to your point, having 50 people on the call is probably not that feasible either.
Right, right.
So yeah, in terms of the application process, we obviously use the technology we have at hand. And so we use Microsoft Forms and send that out for people to apply, and just give some reasons as to how they would use it, and kind of give it just a detailed overview of how they think that a Copilot could help. However, an important piece of this was also doing a supervisor check-in, just to see, capacity wise, and maybe there's other projects happening at the same time. And not to say that that's a no right now, or it's maybe just maybe a little bit later, in a couple of months, maybe when things are, a little calmer. And Nate, it looks like you have a comment there.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely wanted to acknowledge too that this isn't, we're planning on probably learning from this process and doing it again, as far as extending this. And so, and it was important to us to get supervisor buy-in, and we wanted to be clear, like, look, we're asking people to basically volunteer their lunches, and the lunches were scheduled out over the next few months, for 45 minutes. And that this was not an excuse to not get your primary job duties done. And we also wanted to make sure that if the person was already struggling with doing that, we didn't want to add something to their plate. So that was also why we had a supervisor check in. The other thing I thought was really important, that we built a charter out, and I don't know if you, forgive me, Nina, I'm not sure if you reference this later or not, but I'll mention it now, is we built out a charter because we also thought it was important, like, what's the purpose of this group? What are we trying to accomplish? We also were very clear that that we need your participation to identify ways in which Copilot is beneficial and valuable to your role or not. If the answer is or not, that then we're going to reassign the Copilot license. So just because you're getting a Copilot license for this round of the lunch and learns, this round of engagement, doesn't mean you're going to keep it. And so part of it is going to be on you as a participant to identify ways that it's valuable for your role, so that we can justify keeping the Copilot license assigned to you. And so anyway, that was, I think, an important variable to set expectations up front, so that we didn't have to feel like we were pulling the rug out from somebody, after down the path.
Yeah, and excuse me. In our previous video, we actually go into quite a bit of detail on the charter. So if you're interested in getting some more information there, one of the other requirements in the charter was actually that any participant would complete the minimum training, which is the introduction to Copilot, which is a Microsoft learning pathway module. And so yeah, everybody did that really quickly. It's not a huge time investment. So, alrighty. So yeah, now to the actual fun part of the session, which is getting some feedback from one of our champions, because there's going to be a limitation to what Nate and I are using it for in our world, and I think really to get a better sense of some other use cases, we do want to pull other people into these conversations. So yeah, Nick, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about just your use case and some of the lessons you've learned along the way.
Yeah, the primary use case I found, so I guess I should start with, I mentioned I'm a coordinator and I do admin things for the consulting team, but I also have a technical background and do technical tasks as well. And what I really found Copilot helpful with, and this RTF framework that we'll get into, is generating an internal facing document for what goes on with a BEC, which is business email compromise. So what happens after that's been determined that there is one and insurance is being activated? What's the typical insurance process? What is breach counsel, and how do they interact with insurance? And activating a cybersecurity incident response team. How does that work? What could a business owner expect to find out from that? That's something I and a security consultant work with every day, but other team members may not be familiar with the process. An account manager working with the client may have a question, and I just wanted to make a handy guide for an internal facing thing that we could also take from and make a more streamlined client facing one. So that's kind of the use case I was exploring with that. And to do that, I use the RTF framework, which it's a way of structuring prompts with role, task, format. And so you basically start by telling Copilot, here's the kind of role you're going to take. Pretend you're a security consultant at an MSP working with small and medium businesses. And the more specific details in that, the better. So the AI kind of knows it, just more context, the better. Nina, I believe you've used
Yep.
the analogy. It's kind of like an intern. So like you want to give the intern as much context and support to solve a problem as possible. So you'll see in the actual prompt, I define the role and even support it with the phrase, take a step back, think step by step, how to achieve the clearest possible results. That in all of my experimentation for more complex prompts that go, in an order of operations or some sort of process, adding that really seems to help get better results in my outputs. And
Which seems really weird, but like I've heard that
Yeah.
too, even when I've gone to conferences. Like you're like and really it's in the concept of like treat it like a human, right? Treat the AI like the prompt as if like, okay, all right, it's okay, take a step back, breathe, think about it before you spit out. It's like doing things like that, not just that, but things like that in your interaction. We've heard time and time again that this is does result in better output.
Yeah, and it really helps you avoid, I believe the term that they're using in articles is AI hallucinations, which is where you have, a very detailed very good sounding output, but it's completely false and the AI just made it up. And so they've been calling those AI hallucinations, and telling it to slow down and think about it logically
Yeah.
kind of helps avoid
Mhm.
those as well. Um,
Which is just so
so
weird, but
yeah,
yes.
Yes.
it's wild, but it's working.
Yeah.
So and then with the task, I in this one I break it down into different sections, which is one option because for the document I wanted to have different sections, but really the key is just define the task, give it a goal that it can shoot for,
Mhm.
and be as detailed in your context and specific in that as you can. Like instead of, tell me about climate change as a prompt, say like discuss the economic implications of climate change in developing countries in the next decade or something like that. Like specific, not just a broad term. And the other point, just in prompt engineering in general, is keep iterating on that. So if something is
Mhm.
too vague, just you don't need to do the whole role again. You can build like a conversation, like expand on this. Now consider if you looked at it from this point of view, and then the outputs kind of get better and better as you iterate through that. So after you kind of define a task of what you need, which I do with the write-in overview of what the business owner should expect next in that highlighted portion, and then I kind of break it down the format. I give it different sections. That's one way to format it. You can also, you if your prompt would be good in a table, you can just ask Copilot to create a table for the results, and it will do that. Or if you want it in a certain ascending or descending order based on a certain piece of data, you just tell it that and it will do it. You just need to be specific and again act like it's an intern you're talking to, and just, you know, tell it who they are, tell it the goal, and then the way you want to see the results formatted. And
And
that's a good base structure. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I like what you said about iterate because I think it came up in our call yesterday, in our check-in
Mhm.
call. I think especially for people starting out, they try a prompt, it's not at all what they want, and they get frustrated and they kind of give up right there. And just like with the intern, example, like you have to, keep giving it's more sort of clarifying prompts, help them to refine it, help them to expand on a specific section or give them more detail. And so that whole iteration is a really important piece of this, I think.
And Nick, could you talk about like I see something here that I don't think most people are used to when you have the hashtag or the pound sign.
Hmm.
I'm aging myself by calling it a pound sign, but
That's what I always called it too, Nate. Don't worry.
yeah, just you know what I mean. So, um, but like you obviously have done something with that. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that is interpreted by AI, I guess, or by Copilot?
Yeah, so this is one way of organizing prompts. I'm taking it from a text structure called Markdown, which is it's basically formatting for text files like .txt files, and basically in any Markdown editor, one pound sign or hashtag is the largest heading. So if you're in a Word document, that's heading 1. Two pound
Mhm.
signs heading 2, and an asterisk is a bullet point. So it's a standardized formatting thing for text documents. You can Google Markdown and kind of see all the little things you can do with it. And the note-taking application I use is called Obsidian, and it's a Markdown editor, and then all of your notes are just text files on your machine. So then the benefit of that is then I can then take that and directly copy and paste without worrying about any formatting issues into Copilot. Um, and I can also ask Copilot with the format thing. I can say you export in Markdown, and it knows that, and then it will spit out results. So then I can just open it up in my notes, and I have nice formatted headers. I have bullet points. I have a nice table, and it all just looks good from the jump.
So this is one of the things that Nick is, as you mentioned in the beginning, is a little bit more technical. And
Mhm.
so if there's some, ask you, Nick, to do one last thing. If there's any
Mhm.
reference, I know where you found some other valuable information. If the more technically inclined folks that are listening in right now or in the future, because there are some things that you can do with Copilot by leveraging more technical capabilities if you're so inclined. And so for those of you who are not technically inclined, forgive me. That's almost like earmuffs, because your eyes are probably going to glaze over. My eyes glaze over a little bit when I hear this, candidly, even though I feel like I'm somewhat technical. So let's quick technical honorable mention for those that are more technical, because I think there's some cool stuff that you can share real quick.
Yes, and I'll actually start with a source for this GitHub thing. The best resource would be a YouTuber called Network Chuck. He has a video called "You're Using AI Wrong," which covers an open source framework called Fabric, which is kind of the key thing I've been diving into. It's an open source framework for AI by Daniel Miessler on GitHub, and that Network Chuck video just has a great overview of what it is, how to use it, and just for a big, broad overview that people can dive into if they're so inclined. It's just a collection of long form prompts in that markdown thing, but I'm talking about sometimes up to 2 pages full of examples, and it's just, and it puts that in the command line. So you can, do that all for all the tech nerds, like in your CLI. If you use Windows subsystem for Linux, you can use Linux. You can get it running on, I believe you can use PowerShell, but that's the long and short of it, is that. And then if you use Copilot, you can just take the patterns they have in that GitHub and directly copy and paste them over and use them as a basis to create your own prompts.
And we'll share that link. And when we say tech nerds, we are self-professed tech nerds here, and so it is very much an endearing term, not a derogatory one. So if you're a fellow tech nerd, that's why we wanted to share that, because we know that we're not just talking to folks that don't consider themselves tech nerds. So Nick, thanks for sharing that, and we'll get that video as a reference too. And we'll share it on the channel as well. So, all right, Nina, let's just go to the next step. I know we got a few more things to cover, and not a whole lot of time to cover it.
Yep. Yeah. So I just wanted to show the output of the prompt, just so you can kind of see some of the results and how it did exactly what Nick was just describing and outlining those steps. So Nick, I had one quick final question on that. Like, if you had to do this from scratch versus using the prompt, what kind of, on average, what do you think the time saving was for you?
Just researching all these different things and thinking about how they would fit together. Honestly, probably about an hour and a half at least. Just because this gave me a great thing to start from. So then when it's in front of me, I'm better at thinking of the flow of a document. So I can start with this, see, okay, let's have this section there that can flow into this. Oh, this sounds a little bit off. Let me edit that paragraph and add in another section there. But it's a great starting point that got me a bunch of, it got me into a good place, like almost halfway through my job.
That's awesome. And I think you raise an important point there. We never want to just use the results as is. Like, it's really just a really good kickoff point. Maybe it can get us 30-40% of the way. We still have to pull our own weight and do our own work in that in the results. But yeah, just a great example there. So just
going back really quick on that, Nina, I think one of the tips that helps you do that is notice that there's little source references in the content in the output. You'll see the little numbers, and so one of the ways that Copilot in theory is summarizing this, and so if you want to validate that the data that it's sharing is actually what you're looking for and legitimate or accurate, if you will, follow the sources. That's a place to start, to go look and say, okay, read the article, dig in a little deeper if you want to like validate it and be like, okay, this actually is achieving and accurately referencing content that's applicable to what I'm trying to achieve. So I think that gives you a way to shortcut instead of having to do a bunch of searches and find it shortcuts your way to do the due diligence to validate the data is the output you're seeking.
Great.
I did follow the sources to when I was editing the document. That's a great point to bring up.
Awesome. Thanks.
So I just one quick last example on the whole RTF framework. I wanted to show you how by doing the exact same prompt, but just tweaking the role, you would get completely different results. So in this one, the role is salesperson. The task is 5 reasons why I need Copilot, and I wanted to make sure that the format was in a table format. So this is the prompt. You're a salesperson. Please give me a list of 5 reasons why I need Copilot in my small business. Do it in a table format. You'll see it talks about productivity, improved customer engagement, cost savings, scalability, that type of thing. Watch what happens now when I do exactly the same prompt, but change the role to security expert. So you'll see the results are vastly different. Threat detection, data protection, compliance. So just that small tweak really can make a big difference. And I think that was one of my biggest
Mm.
takeaways as I'm working with prompts as well.
Yeah, where you're giving it the role, right?
Yeah,
Just
with one
adding the
small
role to
thing.
the equation,
Yes,
right, is
Hmm.
yes.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, last thing I wanted to really touch on quickly was we really have started creating 2 libraries. And again, that's in our SharePoint intranet. So I'll show that in just a second. Using technology we already have. So it's in our, we have a 365 learning portal, and I'll probably just head over there now just to show that. Um, one thing is that's really difficult is to keep track of all these really great prompts. I'll often maybe use something and I think, wow, this is amazing. And then, I haven't used it for 2 weeks and I forget. Or I really want to share that with others in our champion community or within my tech and I forget. So one thing is working quite well here is I've used a Microsoft list to create prompts and tag it for specific applications and with specific keywords. So if I'm looking for some ideas around prompts around Teams, for example, I can actually just go filter that and find a whole lot of prompts that are relevant to Teams. It's also useful for me for training. Again, I can't remember every single prompt I've ever used. And so this is just a really easy reference as we're doing Copilot training for people to go in here and say, oh, wow, there's some really good stuff in here that I could potentially be using for myself. Together with that, though, I think something that you said right at the beginning, Nate, is one of the biggest challenges is just trying to figure out how Copilot could work for different departments and roles, which is
Mhm.
why we wanted to pull in Nick today, because that's very specific to his role. And so the scenario library is a way to kind of keep track of some of this. So how would HR specifically be using this? How would somebody in IT or consulting be using this? Because again, if you think about the examples we did now by changing the role, those prompts and those examples and those applications are probably going to be quite a bit different. So if we're looking at something like IT, providing a document detailing the architecture of a specific piece of software or a system is going to be vastly different to HR using it for perhaps interview questions for a specific role or position in the company. And so it's a slow process, I will say that, but as I'm finding things, I'm trying to build that out and hopefully help people in that role to get some ideas, to spark some, oh
Mhm.
yeah, that's how I could be using it. And so this is kind of what we're working on right now. And Nate.
Yeah, I think this was helpful. So yesterday we had one of our champion, our Copilot Champions Group internal just lunches that we had referenced, and just sharing this and letting people navigate to it. People started reading the prompts and be like, "Oh, well, I didn't think about that," or "Hey, that's kind
Mm,
of cool. I'm going to use this." So it just, again, I think some of the problems is that because none of us are experts at this and none of us are used to using this tool or AI in general, that we're limited by our own creativity to some extent, right, and our own imagination, and we're just it's but giving you some ideas. It's not unlike how Nick referenced when by using the prompt it gave him a starting place. Well, this kind of gets you a starting place to the starting place, right? It gives you a starting
mhm,
place of like what's possible, what's capable in Teams, how can it help me inside of Word or Outlook, and trying to think through some of those things. We actually had an example that came in yesterday in our conversation where uh, there's sometimes email correspondence from a single person, but yet and sometimes and we've probably all done this where we're corresponding with the same people, but I respond to one string when I really meant to respond to the other string. So what I wrote was actually pertinent to the other string and not the one I replied to, and trying to if there's a lot of that going on, especially if you've been out of the office. So asking Copilot to say, hey, summarize any actions
Mhm.
from this person or this email address, right? To help think through some of those things. Like those are just examples of like once you start sharing these ideas or building this out and then collaborating on it. And then again, these are some of our suggestions, and that we do see it working as far as helping generate ideas, but also helping people see ways to use Copilot that they didn't think about to save time and to get clarity and to filter through like lots of emails sometimes that we all get. So those are just little examples. I'm sure Nina, you've got some other things to bring up here.
No, no, I think you've hit on most of them. I think some of the ones that we found yesterday really resonated with people was like, what's the latest from Nick? Organized by emails, chats, and files, or what's the latest on a specific topic, for example. So to your point, like, we're trying to figure out what's happening with a specific project, and just trying to track through all of those emails and chats and try to get a good summary of what's going on. Those are just some ideas of how you could potentially use it.
So we'll take some work to build some of this out internally. Candidly, I mean, this is not. I mean, one of the things about lists is that doing the metadata and the tagging is not like just an import.
No.
It's something you have to do selection and do some work and be intentional about it. But we have definitely already started finding value in
Mhm.
our sessions, that our lunch and learn sessions that we're doing at creating this champions community. So. Look, we'll wrap up. We're just at or just over time. I want to thank everyone for either watching live or watching the recording in the future. Again, our goal is we recognize this technology is moving very quickly, and it's sometimes frustrating to anyone in the corporate or business nonprofit world. Doesn't matter when some new technology gets thrown at you after your budget was done, after you already had your plans for the year, and you're just expected to like pivot. And so just acknowledging that, but hopefully together we can learn and share and find some things that work. Hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes that we made to maybe further your journey. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So hopefully we'll see you again next time. Please join our LinkedIn community, which is the Microsoft 365 Champions community, and we'll hopefully see you again next month.